Everyone feels like we need a radical change today, but most of us don't really know how to bring it about. We wrote a book called If Not This Then What, and we introduce in it a framework for radical systems change. The third view is where we apply this framework to the things happening all around us so that we're better able to understand radical change. And when we understand radical change, its structure and the logic behind it, we can also shape it. I'm Mansi, and with me are Eric and Yana. This week, we're going to talk about an article we wrote about two pieces of analysis that came out evaluating the impact of AI on enterprise software. One analysis, Citrini Research, said that AI is going to lead to a 40 to 60% drawdown in software stocks. The other piece of analysis from HSBC Private Banking actually said that the software industry is safe. In fact, it's going to come out stronger. We actually think both are correct, and we argue that the gap between them isn't because of the quality of their analysis, but because they've chosen two different levels of focus. HSBC Private Banking looked at what we've always been looking at when defining strategies, at the companies in the software industry and their competitive moats. Citrini Research, on the other hand, looked at the system in which these companies and this entire industry is embedded. In today's conversation, we actually ended up somewhere we didn't really expect. We started talking about Anthropic and how it pulled one of its most powerful models before releasing it, and what that tells us about whether these AI companies are maybe the first in history being forced to consider the entire system before they damage it. And in doing so, they might be redefining how businesses should have always looked at their strategic decisions. This is where the conversation goes, and characteristically, we take many detours along the way. Let's get into it. So, one of the central sort of arguments that we're making in the article is that even though we're talking about AI and its impact on software, actually, this isn't a story about AI or software. It's really about the lens we take and the focus that we use to develop a strategy. I thought maybe we could start off with talking about exactly how strategy is done today and what's the one big thing that can change to fix this gap. And we've talked about the gap a little bit in the article, but maybe elaborate a little bit more on it.
Yeah, so for me, I think one of the big underlying changes is that the pace is going way faster than usual old school strategy processes, right? Old school strategy is mostly top down. It takes indeed, I don't know, you do it depending on the organization, you do it once every 3 or 5 years. And it's really a bit focused. Mostly, it's indeed focused on slowly moving trends. Yeah, and now if the world is changing much faster than that, then this is no longer of any use, obviously. So then you need to change quite some aspects, I would say. So you cannot do one strategy process and then after 3 years another. Maybe it has to be a continuous process. Maybe you would have to have multiples. Maybe you would want to have not only top down but also bottom up, many bottom up ones. So yeah, that's the feeling that I get, and that's more like you have to really explore the territory, right? That's the kind of thing that you have to do if things are moving or changing really fast. You have to have enough people out there to see the changing territory.
Yeah. So this concept is actually not necessarily new. I think in innovation, they say that, there's a part of your business that should focus on what is it, exploitation, which is the exploitation of your current business model. And another part should focus on exploration, I believe, which is indeed just new business models, new products. So is there a difference in what we are saying in terms of systems thinking or thinking broader versus just exploitation versus exploration?
I think exploration, exploiting, I don't know. I think it's much more about the word system thinking. I mean, it's like, don't think about the pink elephant. It is super difficult because immediately you will think, oh, damn, pink elephant. You will see it.
For listeners like me who find it hard to keep up with Eric, when Eric talks about the pink elephant, What he really means is when you start from a business model and try to look for a new business model that is completely different, chances are you're going to be stuck thinking about your old business model. In fact, that's the only thing you're going to be thinking about. Now back to the conversation.
This is why, and we spent a tremendous amount of time thinking about what is the right word. But I honestly believe the right word is reality because it overarches the system. Reality, in that sense, much bigger than system.
At this point, Eric and Yana went on a 35-minute philosophical detour on the main differences between a system and a reality. We will probably have an episode about that later, but for now, we'll spare you the details and fast forward to the more relevant part of the conversation.
Yes, and I do also agree with the insight that you're kind of implying here, that it sounds quite safe to, if you're looking for a change, to look for changes in the system and not a change in yourself, right?
Exactly, because the reality involves yourself. And we have spoken so many times about this. People want to change everything. And then you ask them, what would you do? Yeah, same thing. Yeah, that's impossible. That's absolutely impossible. If everything changes, you change along as well.
Yeah, but that's an interesting thread to pull on, not only because it clarifies, like the way you put it, Yana, that a system is a system like Eric has described it. It serves a particular function that is, let's say, more or less objective. And a reality is me plus multiple systems. And when you change a reality, you have to, by definition, also change yourself. And that never really shows up as a part of the equation. And that's where defining reality as the way we've defined it is so important. Because that's maybe then the next thread to pull on is, well, if AI is going to do all of the things that Citrini says it's going to do, or something else, irrespective, it is going to create a new world, a new reality. What then is a software company to do in that situation? And while we've put forward some suggestions of what that could be, they all imply a major change, not only in the product that they're selling or the way they're doing things, but literally they become different companies. And that in itself, just the magnitude of that change feels like it's speculative, it's wishful thinking. What if none of what Citrini research is saying happens? Then we would have wasted all of this time trying to invert everything about our business and do it for nothing because it didn't materialize. How would you respond to that? Like, firstly, I think 2 points to this. One is this idea of software companies don't stay software companies in this new reality that emerges out of whether it's a Citrini research article or whatever impact AI has in the world. But then, secondly, when is the threshold where this overall transformation and everything that the company does needs to be seriously considered instead of just being speculative brainstorming?
I would say it's clinging on to the old reality to think that you can keep doing what you do as an individual software engineer, as a company, be it small or large. So yeah, of course, it's no good to cling to an old reality when everything is changing. But what you know up front is that most companies cannot stay the size they are. They cannot keep on doing the services they do.
Also, I think these companies, they know that they are in a certain segment, so they know a lot about that area of business or that segment of the market. And I think they have a lot of knowledge in that space. So, and they understand the essences in that space. And I think for those companies to think software becomes useless, okay, so how could we think about flipped essences around that to think about a new reality that's interesting? I think then you can find them.
A sidebar for listeners who aren't familiar with the concept of essences and inverting these essences or flipping these essences. This is drawn from the framework that we have described in our book, If Not This, Then What? An essence represents any fundamental building block of a system or a specific reality. It is an important aspect of that reality. And by inverting essences, you can radically change the reality because you are inverting the fundamental aspects and descriptors of that reality. We talk about essences and inversions a lot in our podcast, but you can think of essences as the first principles of a system, and you can think of inversion as a radical change in those fundamental principles.
And will it be the same company with the same people with the same size? Definitely not. Could be smaller, like Janne said. Could also be much bigger. But it depends on the thinking that you do. But they have a whole bunch of knowledge in a specific area, and they could use that to their advantage. But if all the thinking is about keeping the company the same size with the same numbers in the balance sheet, yeah, that's the wrong thinking. Absolutely, because that is not going to happen.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I like this view. Someone once pictured it for me that you could say that organizations are just a group of people with a dotted line around it, right? And of course, the people will stay, but the dotted lines they might go away or they will shift a little. So that's the kind of thing you have to let go very early on, I guess, if you want to move to something, and indeed also not so being active in this change and not passive.
Would you say the dotted line is the identity of the company?
Yeah, in that sense, yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
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 Identity, and that's a lot of things. Indeed, it's knowledge, it's culture, and Philips is a nice example in that sense. It used to be a big vertical, and then it chopped itself up into parts. And some parts have grown tremendously. ASML is an example, but there are many more. So it's the kind of dotted line that's more fluid. Yeah.
I know, for example, we've talked a lot about corporates and the difficulty they have in redefining their identity, even in the face of existential threats. Also, the myopia of these corporates to recognize these existential threats, cognitive dissonance, and whatnot. Are there any ideas, thoughts, advice pieces that you want to share from there?
Yeah, you used the word identity, and so indeed organizations have a certain identity, and that's in line with what we told, what we stated earlier, that in a radical change, you yourself will have to change as well. That the same goes for organizations, huh? And there have been maybe Mansi, you know way more about it, but there have been examples of large organizations that were able to change their identity. IBM is always mentioned as an example.
Nokia.
Nokia, indeed, yeah. So, and then that usually stems from leaders that really deeply understand their current reality in relation to their place in in their reality, right?
Yeah.
But of course, it takes time to change the identity of a company. Then and maybe then we should think of ways to change that as more swift. And again, as a person, you are able to to change way quicker. Huh? Again, if you move to another city, then you change, and it's not the full you changing, but it's really a big part of you will change. If you get a child, then you change also in a couple of months, right?
Yeah.
So so I think we as individuals we are able to do that, but somehow for large organizations we never really had to do it in a swift way.
Yeah.
Yeah, so in the personal space, this is a good example. Yes.
Yeah, and it's in a way you could say, is it difficult? Then you could say, well, in a way, it's super difficult. In the other way, it's not difficult at all because every mother, every everywhere. They do it
Every
overnight.
father as well, I must say.
Yeah, okay. So, but you get my point. So, so in a way, it's not difficult. You
Yeah,
just have
yeah.
to do it. But it's and I mentioned many times already. It's about accepting that new reality.
I also think that point, just very briefly, that you pointed to, Ayana, that not everything about you changes, but you definitely change certain aspects of you that also makes it easier. Because if you start thinking about the identity of your company beyond just your product, but also indeed the knowledge that you've built up, the other sort of capabilities and skill sets that you have, yes, maybe the product part changes, but the knowledge part can remain intact. And so you could also make it easier by focusing on the part of your identity that you are keeping intact and bringing more center stage, as opposed to another aspect of your identity that was center stage earlier. That's also another easier way to talk about it. I think, Eric, you've mentioned that from a leadership perspective as well, managing the change for the people that are going through it in a company that is changing, it can be disconcerting for a lot of people. But then to be able to also highlight the parts that are not changing and the parts that we're going to focus on could also be a way to make that change in identity easier.
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah.
But I was also thinking, Mansi, and it's not related to your question, but the way Anthropic is dealing with their new model, I think it's one of the very few examples where they are thinking about a new reality and then decide to pull their product for the moment because they know it's gone, it's like a nuclear bomb going off in software land. Huh? So the more we are talking about it, I start to realize that actually Anthropic, maybe for the first time, they're actually doing this because they thought about the consequences of their product. And then they thought, oh, damn, this is a terrible idea. Let's not do that. We have to think about it. We have to think it through.
But sorry, Eric. I'm not sure if I am up to date on Anthropic because
So they have a new model. It has a name. I forget the name. Mayokin also or something like that.
Eric is talking about Claude Mythos.
And it is so powerful. It is a step change in performance. And they said, let's check if it can find errors in existing software. And they gave it all the operating systems they could find, and it found bugs and security vulnerabilities, backdoors, all kinds of things in essentially in any piece of software that they fed to it, even in a piece of software that was tested over 5 million times because it was so critical. They found a security issue. Then they said, if we release this software, no one will be safe for anything at all. So we
yeah,
cannot release it. So you could argue they were actually thinking about
Yeah.
a system.
Yeah, it also points to this recent paper that I think Sam Altman and OpenAI put out about all of the policy changes that they suggest be brought into place so that AI can be regulated. You could also argue maybe AI is in itself a technology that is forcing a focus on systems as opposed to just the company or the industry as
Yeah, yeah.
such.
Yes, of course. We heard from the OpenAI and Elon
Mm.
Musk at the beginning.
Yeah.
AI is dangerous, but the Citrini article is not saying anything else. Then it's becoming clear that it's actually
Mhm.
dangerous.
Mm. Yeah, that's interesting. It just popped in my head that maybe, when we wrote the article, the title was Business is Finally Having Its Systems Thinking Moment. It's not so much about the Citrini article as much as it is that these AI companies are maybe for the first time thinking in a broader way about the general reality and therefore acting like it when actually we should have been doing this for all of the quote unquote bullshit products with the externalities. These these externalities are just the same as the externalities of AI, but they were considered too small to be a part of the conversation. But this is exactly what I guess we're suggesting as well.
Yeah, that's interesting. So the don't care here
Yeah.
is turning into a do care, so quickly.
Yeah.
Before
Well,
commercialization,
and I
almost.
mean, the scale of these companies, insane, huh? So this
Mm-hmm.
is a startup, nearing a trillion.
Yeah.
The scale of that is enormous. It's absolutely enormous. So,
It's essentially what we have suggested in the book. Address a don't care before it becomes a do care.
Yeah, okay, but then I would want to have independent thinkers also
yeah,
to
yeah.
think along, right? Because, I don't know if they can be trusted with our reality. So I'm not, at least not sure.
Yeah, yeah, indeed.
Jan, I had a new idea, I think. So let me just throw it out live in the podcast. But I think reality can change super fast, and then the change that is below it can be slow. So
Yeah.
you get the baby, that's a day or whatever, and then you have to become a mother, but that is slower. And
Mm,
it's like if you go on holiday, you fly to, I don't know, to Spain, and the weather is nice, but it will take a few days for you to accommodate, settle in, feel the rhythm, understand the food. I don't know, many things. And then maybe after, let's say, a week, you sort of you find yourself in that rhythm. But that
mm.
takes time. But the new reality was immediately there. But you're always slower. I don't know. I have to think about it, but there's something there.
Yes.
Could I suggest when imposed from the outside,
Yeah,
change can be really fast.
yeah.
When it's an environmental sort of radical change, it can happen from one day to the next. But when it is triggered, when the need for change is triggered from within the
It's
system,
slow.
whether it's a don't care,
Yeah,
inverting into a do care, or whether it's a dogma inverting into a don't care, that unraveling and unfolding of change will be much
I
slower.
think so. If you look, for instance, at CO2, it's a problem that because of scale it became a problem, and building up the skill takes time. So it's slow.
Yeah, again, I think most of our endeavors for real radical change start from a frustration from some kind of aspect of reality we want to move away from. So the directionality is not towards something, but it's away from something.
Yeah,
And people, I don't know what it is in our current culture that most people don't like to think of it that way. So that's something else to explore. But most change is just moving away from something and or another.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then the thinking about radical change that we keep on talking about is that if you know what you want to move away from, and if you know really the reality and the systems underneath, how they are organized, what it is that you want to move away from, and that's in itself not a very easy question. You really have to spend time on it. But once you know, then of course you can at least define very effective ways of moving away from it. That's also what we talked about in the Trump article, right? Maybe he doesn't know where he's going, but he certainly has effective ways to move away what he has now. And then that
Mm-hmm.
also connects back to the Citrini article. So it kind of states where we could be moving towards, but it actually also saying what we move away from. And there are many more ways to move away from that. Huh?
exactly. Yeah,
So then it's the actual scale that those models have, and then the potential for really changing a lot and also changing for the worse. That scale is then so big that that will maybe indeed make the leaders of those companies think about not only their companies but of the whole, and not only the parts. That would be a real drastic change as compared to the old days where companies didn't need to do that, right? The companies wouldn't have the reach to urge them to think about the whole. Maybe, of course, over time with CO2 and the oil companies, looking in the rear mirror, you could say that they should have, and some of them had. The other example that comes to mind is the invention of the nuclear bomb, where physicists were realizing what they were doing, and then politicians also thought it through of what this kind of reality would look like and how to deal with it in a way that it wouldn't destroy our world. So there again,
Okay.
scale is, and a change of scale is what actually triggers could trigger, I'm not sure yet for those companies, what could trigger a real change in behavior.
Yeah. Yeah. So in our book, the advice that we give to companies, to people in companies that are working on their strategies, we say imagine the scale increasing to 10 times, 100 times what you have today. What are the problems that you expect? AI companies, just like the inventors of the nuclear bomb, didn't have to imagine. They almost knew by definition what that scale already is. And that is the right trigger for moving strategy away from the tiny boundaries of the company or the industry to actually the entire reality that you need to address.
I think so. Yeah. Yeah.
That's where we will end the conversation today. You can find our essay on bureauwo.substack.com. We'll be back in 2 weeks with a new topic. Hope to see you then.